reflect back to you about who you are. It's tough in adolescence to try to do that, but we have a whole chapter on that when I talk about Erickson in about 2 weeks about doing that, and I'll answer that some more. Okay, good question. All right, so humanism. I like humanism because it says we all have a chance. Okay, the other people, Freud basically said, you know, however you were treated as a child, you're just stuck that way, and that's the way you're going to be for the rest of your life. Okay, Skinner said, you know, however you've been conditioned, it's hard to change conditioning. But humanism comes along and says, no, man, everybody can really change and reach your fullest potential. That's the key word, reaching your fullest potential. All right, there are 2 other theories today that are also very popular. One is called psychobiological, and I don't have a name for you, so there isn't one person who has written a lot about this. And what this says is that we are who we are because we're human, and animal behavior is the result of internal physical, chemical, and biological processes. It's your brain that makes you who you are. Everybody has a little different brain, and it's the chemical and neurological processes that go on that have an influence on how you got to be who you are. All right, so they emphasize more of the biology on that. And then the last one that's popular today was developed by Ellis, and it's called the cognitive approach, where much human behavior can be understood in terms of mental processing, which basically says that what you think is who you are. Change the way you think, and you'll change the way you feel and behave. It's all about this massive brain that we have up here and the way we perceive the world and ourselves. So that's a different view, and it's very different than Skinner and Watson and Freud. So those are the big 5 theories that we have today, and probably the most popular theories to answer the question, how did we get to be who we are? Okay? How did we get to be who we are? In psychology, as I mentioned last week, okay, the psychobiological approach is becoming much more interesting because we're beginning to find out we can peek into your brains as you think and as you do things and actually see how your brain works. And people who are very emotional people have very well developed parts of their brains that are emotional, okay, that develop emotions and make you feel. Those of you who are very analytical and very rational and you don't pay much attention to your feelings, we can peek in your brain and see those parts of your brains seem to be more developed than other parts of the brain. We can peek into schizophrenics' brains and see that their structure in their brain, how their brain works, is very different than non-schizophrenics' brains. So what we're beginning to see is that the brain has a lot to do with who you are. Just as a point of reference, just as an opinion question, this is not for a point, there's no right or wrong answer, but what is the most valid explanation of human behavior? Out of all those 5 theories I just gave you, which one do you think is the most valid? This is just your opinion. I guess I could also ask it as, which one do you like the most? All right, just to review for you, psychodynamic would be Freud. Right? Behaviorism would be Skinner and Watson. Humanism would be Rogers. Psychobiology, you don't have a name for you. And cognitive would be Ellis. Which one what? Which one would I choose? I'd probably choose 6, all of the above. But by the way, a lot of my questions are that way, because I think really all of the above is the right one, but I want you to think about it. I like humanism the most. It just appeals to me that we get a choice of being who we want to be. The more I study the brain, though, the more I think, boy, there's a lot to the biological part that's there. And I'm going to explain, the next thing I'm going to explain to you is my view. Okay? Thank you for asking. All right, so what do we have? Most of you think humanism. Okay? Hopefully you didn't do that just because I just said it, but yeah, humanism, behaviorism, psychodynamic, not that important. But most people do. I mean, that seems to be the most positive, doesn't it, for all of us? Here's a question for 1 point. Ready? See if you were listening. This is called an application question. When I put questions up on here, one, I want to see if you're listening. 2, you could get a point if you get it right. 3, I also want to teach you how to take multiple choice questions, because a lot of people just don't know how to do this. This is called an application question. It's a situation in which Taylor believes his behavior is guided by his own self-image and that he has the power to control his own fate and reach his full potential. He has adopted which psychological perspective? So you can look at your notes, you can think about it. Now, when you take a multiple choice question, you should be looking for key words. What would be the key words in this question? Self-image, right? What? Control his own fate? Has a choice? Right? Now, sometimes when you study information, I didn't put the word choice in here, did I? But that word choice I talked about with one specific perspective. So when you do a multiple choice question, you want to look what the key words are. And those key words should automatically get you thinking about certain answers. Because when you study for the exam, you should be saying humanism. What is humanism? It's developed by Rogers, where people have free will, they can develop their greatest potential, they have a choice to do different things. All right, so when I put that in my brain, then I look at these questions, okay, then all of a sudden I can go, boom, that's the answer right there, because I've already matched up information. Taking multiple choice questions is a lot about just matching up to key terms. Boy, I sure hope you all got this one right, because I just gave it away. Everybody got this one? Come on. Answers in. Okay, that's it. All right, 95% of you correct. Right, it's humanism. Right? Own self-image, has a choice, guided by his own fate, reaches its fullest potential. Now, let me also say, every once in a while I might put one of these questions on your test. So when you see these questions up, you might want to write down the answers, okay, and study for it, because it may show up on your test. All right. Now what I want to do, I want to answer his question, and his question was, what is my view on psychology? Hey, what is my view on how people got to be who you are? This is what I think it is. I'm going to call it BioPsychoSocial. Your textbook now is beginning to use this term in some of the chapters. What is BioPsychoSocial? It's an interactive approach that emphasizes the relationships of each one of these: biology, psychology, and sociology. Each section has an influence on each other, so we say they are interdependent. You cannot separate the influence. How did you get to be who you are? It's about your brain, neurochemistry, genetics, which then influences your perception of yourself, psychology, and then the environment. Remember the other day we talked about socioeconomic levels, religion, that's all the sociology part that's there. So how did you get to be who you are? It's all three, and you can't change them. Your brain is genetically predisposed to think a certain way, behave a certain way, and then the environment, sociology, can actually change the structure in the brain. The more you do something environmentally, okay, it's going to change those neurons. The more you do something, the more you think about something. Some of you think about things a lot, and you think about things. Some of you are chronic worriers. You worry about a lot of things. And what has wound up happening is that psychologically, the middle part, psych, you started thinking about, I don't know if I can do this class very well. I'm not sure. This guy goes awful fast. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this class. I hope I do. I'm not sure about that. And then once you start worrying about that, then automatically your brain has been wired to start worrying. because you've been worrying all your life, and then that worry about the class then becomes, gee, but I want to get in the nursing program. If I can't do this class, I may not get to be in the nursing program, then what am I going to do? But I think I was getting married, and the reason why I was getting married, because I thought I'd have a good job in nursing, now I shouldn't get married. And before you know it, your brain has all of these little neurological connections going on, which equal to what? Worry. And then the more you worry, the more these neurons begin to bloom and develop more neurons. So pretty soon you have this huge circuit in your brain that's called the worry circuit. And what winds up happening is that you get outside, you get on LBJ, and there's a lot of cars, and you say, oh my gosh, I hope I don't get into an accident. Why did you just think that? Well, because you've got a worry network going on there. Now, you could change that by saying something like, Steve Link just talked about this. I'm on LBJ, quit worrying, stop it, don't worry about that. And then you don't. And then all of a sudden, if you do that over and over again, those neurons that used to be used for worrying are going to split off and start being used someplace else. So anything that you do, behavior, think, or feel has a neurological connection for it. The more you do it, the more the neurological connection.
Is that what you think, that negative thoughts bring negative actions?
Negative thoughts bring negative actions. Why? Because you're wiring your brain to that.
It's already connected to your head.
It's already connected, and the more you do it, the worse it gets. You do that with thinking that's there. This is a good class, by the way. You're asking a lot of questions. Okay? You have thinking, but the same thing with behaviors. If you're a tennis player and you're constantly doing this over and over again, and you're doing it the correct way over and over again, your brain gets wired and you don't even think about it anymore. It becomes a habit. That's easy to explain, but people don't realize how thoughts do the same thing. Your brain gets wired that way. And that's why it's difficult to change. Okay? And you got to be able to consciously start doing it, but the beauty of this is it's interactive. It's interactive. Do one, then the other one changes. So let me explain this in a little more succinct way. When we talk about biology and how we got to be who you are, we're talking about genetics. We did this the other day. I said that some of you, we know that some people are predisposed to being shy, that there's actually a genetic predisposition to being shy. Some of you were born shy. That's the biology part that's there. Therefore, what happens when you got around a lot of people, you began to get a little nervous. The anxiety then reinforced the neurological connections. Then you began to say to yourself, oh, I'm kind of shy. I don't like being around a lot of people. That's the psychology part. And then when you interacted with the environment and someone said, how are you? You went, oh, fine. Okay? Then people then said to you, oh, that person's shy. That's your environment. Which then what? Reinforced your thinking, which then reinforced the neurological connections. So we see genetics. We know that alcoholism runs in families. Okay, so your dad might have been an alcoholic. You have a genetic predisposition to it. Watch out. But you say, I'm never going to be like my dad. I hate it when my dad came home drunk and he yelled at everybody and said, I'll never do that. You may not be an alcoholic, but you may have a genetic predisposition towards drug abuse. So your drug of choice may not be alcohol, but it may be marijuana. Okay, so you sit around getting high going, I'm glad I'm not like my dad. Okay, but yeah, you are, just you use a different drug. Genetic predispositions, alcoholism, bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, being happy. I mean, all of that could be genetically predisposed. The next one down is neurochemistry. Your brain is full of neurochemicals, okay? And these neurochemicals make you think and feel and behave in certain ways. Some of you are naturally happy. You get up every morning and you get up and you go, it's cold today. I like the cold. It feels good. This is good. I mean, you're just happy all the time. It's kind of like, why are you so happy? It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's cold out. You're like, oh, things are good. You may have an overabundance of the availability of a neurochemical called serotonin. Serotonin is considered to be the happy chemical. So when people have an overabundance of the availability, key word is availability of serotonin, they have a tendency to be happy. They're just happy. Okay? Those of you who got up this morning and went, it's cold again. I don't think it's ever going to get warm. I hate the cold. And you came to class like, is he talking about me? Maybe you don't have high levels of serotonin, and you may have what's called a propensity towards a chemical depression. You get depressed real quick, maybe because you don't have a lot of available serotonin. That's there. When someone gives you an antidepressant, the main neurochemical it works on is serotonin. It increases the availability of serotonin. So it lifts you up, it lifts your mood up, because it keeps the serotonin available. That's there. Some people, by the way, may just naturally have, through genetics, have a neurochemical imbalance and have a tendency towards depression, and they may have to be on an antidepressant for their whole life, just so they get that balanced. I'm sorry. Now, the general world, though, says, oh, you're on an antidepressant, why can't you control it yourself? Well, your brain's not working right. Right? So let's give you a medication. If it helps, use it. We don't go up to someone who's a type 1 diabetic, who's not producing any insulin whatsoever, and say to them, don't go on your insulin. Get off of that stuff. Why can't you control that yourself? Use your brain to do that. Well, their pancreas isn't working well. So it's the same thing for some people who may have chemical depression or bipolar. People who are bipolar got to stay on their medication. It helps them. Schizophrenics got to stay on their medication. These are disorders of the brain, disorders of neurochemical imbalances. And I can go through a whole list of other neurochemicals that we'll talk about as the semester goes on. But that could have an influence on you. 3, your brain structure may have an influence on you. I've already said that a schizophrenic's brain structure is different than a non-schizophrenic's. Those of you who are extremely emotional, we can probably look in your brain and see really thick, wired brain neurology connections with you in the emotional parts of your brain. That's there. So brain structure may have it. Now also remember, okay, that environmental influences can also build up that brain structure, change it, reduce it, or anything else. Hormones have an effect on how you think, feel, and behave. Right, women? Oh, no. Okay? Estrogen, progesterone levels, right? Some of you get very anxious. Some get depressed as your hormones begin to change. Some have no reaction. It does have an influence in how you think and feel and behave. We know that, but did you know that men also have an influence of what's called testosterone that may also change how they think, feel, and behave? Okay? When testosterone levels are high, their sex drive becomes higher. They also become more aggressive and have a tendency not to pay attention as well either. Right, guys? You don't even know this, right? Right? We don't know. We generally look at women on a 28-day cycle, give and take, X number of days. For men, it's kind of like 4 to 6 weeks. We really don't know the exact numbers with that as well. But it is there. So this weekend, women, if you're out with some guy and he's getting a little, should we say, rambunctious with you, okay, just kind of pushing on you a little bit, what you could do is, I don't know if you want to hug him because he might think of that as something else, but you might want to at least tap him on the shoulder and say to him, I understand it's your time of your cycle right now, and I need to be a little more understanding of you. Hormones, right? And later on, when we do chapter 2, I'll talk about other hormones that affect how you think, feel, and behave. Exercise. People don't realize this, but exercise influences how you think, feel, and behave. One of the number 1 treatments for people who are depressed is get them to exercise. Get them active. What does active do? It changes the neurochemicals in your brain. Your brain goes, well, what's going on here? We're working out. Well, I guess I need to release, boom, these types of hormones or neurochemicals to give you energy. But how do you convince someone who's depressed, let's go exercise? You're right. I don't want to do anything. I'm going to go out and run or something. Okay? But it does work. Okay? Nutrition also has an effect on how you think, feel, and behave. There are certain psychiatrists in this town that don't use what's called psychopharmaceuticals. What they do is that they prescribe different types of foods. Let's change your diet, and that may change how you think and feel. We also know that when people get depressed, some people do, when some people get depressed, some people begin to look for what's called comfort foods. Okay? Going to eat some ice cream, some potatoes, mashed potatoes, pasta, cakes, cookies. Those are called what? Simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates, when it's taken into your system, converted into amino acids, and when it gets into the brain, it's converted into a neurochemical called serotonin. So when you're eating that bowl of mashed potatoes, all of a sudden you go, God, I feel better. Why do you feel better? Because you get a rush of serotonin that's there. That's one of the reasons why we call it comfort foods. It makes you feel better. Because when it gets out of your system, then you feel bad again, and then you eat pasta. Okay, I don't know, and then you're 590 pounds after a while. Okay? But they're simple carbohydrates. And so nutrition affects how you think, feel, and behave. You're learning something today? It's not only about what your mother said to you when you were 6 years old. It can be a lot about biology. All right, the psychological part of all this has to do with conditioning. B.F. Skinner and Watson. You did X, somebody reinforced it, therefore you kept doing that. So conditioning, modeling. A lot of times parents say, do what I say, not as I do. Children don't do that. What children do as your parents do, not as they say. Children model, right? They watch their parents all the time. There are things that you will say to your children, and as soon as it comes out of your mouth, you'll go, oh, don't say that. That's exactly what my mother said. Okay? I have a tendency when I walk that I'll put my hands in my pocket like this, and I'll walk like this. When my children were about 3 and 5, I stopped. I think where I was going into Tom Thumb or wherever. I stopped and I turned around, and they were like two little ducklings behind me, hands in their pockets, okay, walking just like Daddy, okay? Because you see this, you hear this time and time again. So what winds up happening, you begin to do it, modeling. And the big one is about self-perception, how you view yourself, or what I'm going to call as life scripts. If biology, we're doing an analogy to computers, biology is the hardwiring in the computer, psychology is the software programming. Okay? It's being written into you. So when you were younger, people told you things about yourself when you were younger. All right? So let's just say you were unlucky. And I really mean this. Some people are lucky, some people are unlucky. You were unlucky and born to a mother, we'll pick on mothers, born to a mother who wasn't emotionally stable, okay, who had a lot of issues. And you're 2.5, 3 years old, and you're drinking your milk at the table, and just like all 2.5, 3 years old, you're kind of clumsy. Okay? Your brain and motor development isn't that good just yet, and you knock over the milk. The milk goes all over the place. And Mom, who's on edge already, goes, I don't believe you did that. You're making such a mess. You're just causing trouble for me. You're just trouble. Okay? Even when I was carrying you, okay, you pushed me and made me urinate all the time because you're always pushing on my bladder. And then I was in labor with you for 3 days. No, I was in labor for 3 days. Okay? And you're just trouble. Everything you do is just trouble. And you're 2.5 years old. You go, I'm sorry. But what's going on? You're getting what? Software programming? A script that says, I'm trouble. So what winds up happening, you're 4 and 5, and every time you make a mistake, because all children make mistakes, okay, because that's who they are, they're children, so you're trying to correct that, but this mother does it. She just says, God, you're just driving me nuts. You're just trouble. Well, this child now has trouble, software programmed in, I'm trouble. So what they're programmed to do now, probably for a good part of their life, is to be trouble. So they're 21 years old and they're going out with a guy who's really patient. He's a nice guy, he's patient, you know, you go off sometimes, he's kind of like, don't worry about it, things are going to work. Then you get it in your head, you know, this guy's just too nice. What's going on here, you know? But you're not thinking about this consciously. This life script is unconscious. So what you're doing is that things are going too well, I'm going to pick a fight. You don't do it consciously. It's you go up to him and say, well, what are we doing this weekend? Oh, you know, I don't have that much money. Maybe we'll just hang out, watch a DVD. Hang out, watch a DVD. How boring. You know what? You're boring. I'm getting really fed up going out with you because you're just boring. You're picking a fight, and he says, what are you talking about? I take you here and there. God, you just don't appreciate me. Yeah, you don't appreciate me. It's all my fault, aren't I? Yeah, I'm just trouble. Yeah, you are. Drama queen. Okay. Well, what just happened was that we do what's normal for us. And if what's normal in my life script is that I'm trouble, then I'm going to provoke that so that someone calls me trouble. That's a life script. Want to do another one? We'll do another one in a negative way in terms of we'll pick on fathers this time. So you're unlucky, and really some of us are lucky. We were born to parents who are psychologically healthy and they helped us out to learn to become, accept figure out who we are, accept ourselves, and be ourselves. But other people are unlucky. So you got this dad who's one of these perfect dads. Everything has to be done the way I want it done. He's super controlling. And you're a boy now, and you had two older brothers who listen to dad, and they're the ones that get A's in all the classes. You know, you're the youngest child, and you're in 3rd grade, and the teacher says, oh, I've had both of your brothers in my class. They were super kids. They got all A's. You're going to get that too. And you're like, oh gosh, I got to live up to them. But you know what? Your brothers were really into math and science. They just had that type of brain. You don't have that type of brain. So you bring your little report card home in 3rd grade, your little 6-week report, and your dad says, let's see your report card. And you say, oh, here it is, Dad. And he says, let me see, 98 in English, 98 in art, 92 in history, 68 in math, 58 in biology. What's going on here? No one in this family does that poor. What's wrong with you? I just don't get it, Dad. All right, get out of here. Go to your room. No computer, no phone, no nothing, okay, for you until you build up your grades. Okay, Dad. Now, by the way, all children want to please their parents. I'm sorry, when you're young like that, now later on you're going, God, your parents are weird, okay? But in the early age, you don't know. You're just like, oh, I want to please you. So you start working hard, and then next report card comes in, all those 90s, and now those 70s have become low 80s, and the 60s have become higher 60s. And you look, Dad, look, I improved. Not good enough yet. Not good. Back in your room again. The year goes on, so finally you bring it up to an 80, but it never gets to be a 90. And your father's like, well, that's better, but you're still not as good as your brothers. So now what's my mental picture, my life script is, in order to be loved and cared about, I better be perfect. I need to be just as good as everybody else, and I'm not. Okay? So now you spend your life trying to be perfect about everything. You come to my class, and you're sitting in my class, sitting next to you, okay? And you say to this person, what'd you get on the first test? And they go, 94. And you go, whoa, that's a great grade. No, it isn't. 94, dude, man, I got a 72. I'm happy with that. you got a 94. That's incredible. No, it isn't. I should have gotten 100. He just asked stupid questions. Must be about Link. Link just asked stupid questions. And you go, 94, that's great. No, I've got to be perfect. In order to be loved and cared about myself, I have to be perfect. Don't want to go out with this person, do you? Because if they think they have to be perfect, then you have to be perfect too. And they're going to be highly analytical, and they're going to do to you what their dad did to them, okay, which to be highly critical. Life scripts. By the way, I can do a positive part too, right? You come home with those grades, and your parent says, You know, you didn't do too well in math. What can we do to help you? By the way, I love you no matter what. Your brothers did well in that. I know everybody's not as good as that. You're great in English and history. That's incredible. Well, what can we do to help you? Because I want you to do better. Okay. I'm a good person. I just don't have a brain for math or something like that. But I'm still a good human being. That's a life script. Things work for me. Things work out. I work hard. It may not be perfect, but things work out. Life scripts. Get it? And then the last part of all this, sociology, is everything we talked about the other day. The environment, culture, religion, socioeconomic levels, peers, family. I'm not going to explain all that. That has an influence on you. So BioPsychoSocial is an interaction of all three. The environment and what goes on in your environment and how you think actually can sculpture the brain. And then the brain, the way it works, can have an influence in how you think, feel, and how you interact in the environment. They all work together. Real quickly, there was a study done at a teaching hospital in Brooklyn, New York, okay, in which they identified children who were child prodigies, I think that's the term. These are kids they identified like at 3 years old who sat down at the piano, never saw a piano in their life, and started playing rhythm. Just right there, you know, melodies right away. They just had it like wired into their brain. They could play, and they went, wow. They then did MRIs of the brain, okay, and functional MRIs in the brain. They looked in their brain, and when you do that, you actually see that these children, in terms of auditory functioning, they can hear the music, and motor development with their fingers are much more advanced than children who don't have those skills. You actually see that development in their brain. Then they went to the parents and said, wow, you really got a child who has incredible talent that's here. Okay? What we want to do, though, come back every 6 months, and we want to do this test. We want to keep looking at their brain, okay, to see what's going on. So some of the parents went, wow, my child could be a famous pianist. That's going to be incredible. And what they did is that they provided them with lessons. They took them to concerts. They had music playing in the house all the time. When they get that brain is being what's stimulated with all this. Those neurological connections bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom. So when those children went back, okay, their skill was much better, but also they saw the brain just blooming because the environment was sculpturing that. There are other parents who went, my child is going to be a pianist? A pianist? That sounds obscene. I don't want my son to be a pianist. I want him to be a quarterback. That's why. And they did nothing to, the key word is enrich the environment for the child. They brought him back. They looked at their brain. It was still much more advanced than children who didn't have the skills, but it was nothing like the children who had the enriching environment. Brain just wasn't as developed.
Is that kind of like savants?
Yeah, some of them are that way. A savant is someone who has incredible skills. Now, usually when we use the word savant, we usually say that there's other issues that are there, like an autistic savant. But these we just call gifted children. Right? And by the way, some people are gifted with art. Some are gifted with athletic abilities, all kinds of different abilities. But what I'm trying to point out is the interaction between all three of these. Still with me? All right, good. Looks like you're with me. It's good that it's cold in here. Just give you a chance to fall asleep. For one point, the theory that recognizes that interaction between all modes, right, is emphasized by your favorite, because I'm on your only introduction to psych professor, right? That was a forced choice there. So what do you think the answer is? What did I just discuss? Did I call it biopsychic? Did I call it linkism? Did I call it biopsychosocial? Or did I call it cowboy fanaticism? It's hard to be a fanatic about the Cowboys. Sorry, they're just a mediocre team. 8-8, 8-8, 8-8. I'm sure Jerry will tell us next year that they'll be in the Super Bowl. What do you think the answer is? You got the answer? Everybody? Should be an easy one, right? Put your answers in. Ready? 1, 2, 3, done? All right, so we have 98% of you right or correct. Okay? Biopsychic would only be 2 parts of that, right? Biological, psychological, the third part is sociological. That's there. All right, so if this shows up on your test, you'll get this one right, because you got it right now. All right, now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, so stay with me. I want to talk with you about how to read your textbook. This is not in your chapter. This is in the preface before your chapter. Most of you skipped over this. If you say to me, Steve, I read that chapter 3 times, and I still only got a 70. What's the deal? I say, well, your mistake was you read the chapter 3 times. You didn't study the chapter. Okay? What I want to do is show you how you don't read chapters, you study chapters. Your book, okay, utilizes the SQ4R method of studying. Some of you had this in high school when they try to teach you how to study. Okay? It works. We put it in psychology because psychologists have done the research on this. It just works. But it takes work. I'm going to turn a 30-minute reading of a chapter into probably a 3-hour endeavor, okay, if you really do it correctly. The first thing you need to do is survey your chapter. Look through the pictures. Just flip through the pages. Just look through it. What surveying does is promote interest. What we know is the more interested you are in a subject, the better you're going to learn. I'm going to try to make this as interesting as possible for you. But the more interested you are, the better you're going to learn. Anybody read People magazine? No, usually you don't read People magazine. You thumb through it. People magazine was developed for waiting rooms. Okay? So you sit there and you pick it up and you flip through it. Okay? And then you look for the pictures, and then you find something that's interesting, then you stop and read it. Otherwise, you survey it. That's how you do People magazine. Same thing with your chapter. Survey it. Go through it. Let's try to prompt interest. What is this chapter going to be about? Then what you want to do is take the chapter headings and turn it into questions. What the questions will do is make you more involved with the chapter. Students who learn, okay, becoming more involved with their learning. Your book does this for you. Your book has a question, then an answer, then another question, another question. But if you're reading your history textbook, and the topic is the history of the War of 1812, okay? What you need to do is turn that into questions. What was the War of 1812? Who were the principal people? What were the causes of it? What were the names of the people? What were the battles that were there? What was the result of it? You want to turn it into questions, so you've got questions now, you're involved with your learning, then you want to sit down and read. And you're reading, trying to find out the answers to your own questions. The more involved you are, the better you're going to do it. Then after you read, and most people should only read a small section and then stop. This is what most of you do. You get your chapter, you read it, then you go, oh, how many more pages do I have? And you flip through it to see how many more pages you have left, right? So what you want to do is just read a small section. Your textbook is developed into modules. A psychologist wrote the textbook, and we know that your attention span is only so long. You read the module, you stop, you recite it to yourself. Talk to yourself. What did I just read here? This is what I read. And you say it to yourself. Then you want to reflect about what you just read. How does this affect my life? We know that people who are interested, survey, question, involved, and then reflect means you make it meaningful to you. The more meaningful, personal this information is, the more you're going to learn it. So how does this affect my life? Gosh, do I have serotonin imbalances? I'm not sure. Okay? Make it more interesting for you. Get involved with it that's there. Reflect about it. Make it personal. Then you want to review what you just learned. So you want to answer the questions you came up in the beginning, or in your textbook, at the end of every module, there's a little review section that's there that asks you questions about what you just learned. And then what you're going to do is finish the whole chapter out, and at the end of the chapter, there'll be some additional review questions, or you go online to the publisher website, and it has about 8 to 10 multiple choice questions about that particular chapter. Some of you have textbooks that at the end of the book, in the appendix, there are a series of multiple choice questions that are there too. Some do, some don't. Some books have it and some don't. That's called the SQ4R method. So what did I do? I just turned a 30-minute read into about a 3-hour study session. But if you did all that, you would learn. And a lot of you are going, 3 hours with a textbook? Oh, how boring. Well, if you want to learn it, that's what you do. By the way, we all learn in multi-sensory approaches. We all right now are listening to me, right? You're watching me and looking at that. That's visual, that's there. You're writing, which means you're involved or kinesthetic. The more senses you use, the better you're going to put information into your brain and the better you can get it out again. So see it, read it, look at it, write it, hear it, and you'll be able to learn better. Matter of fact, multisensory learning is important. Some of you learn better visually, auditory, or by doing. Okay? What's interesting about this is that I could go to the testing center and watch you take the test, and I probably can have a tendency to pretty accurately predict if you're more of an auditory, sensory, or kinesthetic learner, just by watching you to take the test and watching your eyes. Okay? Those of you who are visual learners will do this when you take a test. You'll be doing it, and then you go. You pick your head up, and your eyes will go up to the left as if there's something written on the testing center ceiling, and you're looking up there. What are you looking at? You're trying to visualize your notes or the textbook to come up with the answers. Eye scan patterns. Up to the left is visual. If you're someone who's more auditory, you pick your head up, you have a tendency to defocus a little bit, and then your eyes will go left, right, as if you were talking to yourself, auditory. Okay? Kinesthetic people are trying to get into a feel of it. What was that? What was that? What was it? And their eyes go down to the left. People who are good psychotherapists or good salespeople know this because you can develop rapport with people by figuring out how they perceive the world. If I say to you, do you understand me? And you say, hey, I hear that. And if I say, yeah, I see that, you're going to go, it's like we're talking about two different worlds. But if I match your predicates and you say, yeah, I hear that, and I go, good, I'm glad you hear that. I'm listening well too. If we use the same language, auditory language, you're going to say, good, this guy really understands me. I'm kind of connected to him. Somebody is deep in a feeling and they're feeling bad, they usually have what? Downcast eyes. Did you hear that statement? What you want to do sometimes is go, hey, come on, look up for a second. Well, what do you mean? Good, look up, look at me. No, things aren't so bad. You want to get them out of the feeling, get their eyes to change. It's called neuro-linguistic programming. Interesting stuff? Go try it out on people. Or go on the internet and learn a little bit more about it. Still with me? This is a time where people really fade, about an hour. So I'm going to clap my hands a little bit more for the next 20 minutes. You've had this. Every science course you took in high school covered the scientific method. Well, quick review. I'll do this real quickly. Yes, psychologists use the scientific method. We observe. I'm looking at you people right now and observing you as you're sitting there trying to learn something. As I do this, I wonder, remember psychologists wonder? I wonder if by looking at you, I could determine what kind of grades you may get in this course. Then I want to say, well, I don't know if I can really just look at somebody and do this. Let me see if I can define a problem to be able to predict what kind of grades you get by what? Let me see, how can I do this? How about by where you sit in this class? I wonder if where you sit in this class would predict what kind of grades you get. So now I have a problem. I want to predict what grades you get. I form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess. So my educated guess is the closer you sit to the front, the higher the grades you're going to get. The closer you sit to the front, the higher the grades you get. Now, is that true? I don't know. It's just a hypothesis, right? So what I have to do now is do research to gather evidence to test my hypothesis. So I'm going to think about what research method I should use. Then I'll gather my information, either to retain the hypothesis or reject it. Either one is good research. Either one is good research. I then publish my results, and then I can build a theory from there and maybe tell you people about it. All right? So I have done this research, and I'll tell you what the answer to that is in a second. So the scientific method is exactly what biologists and chemists use, and psychologists use it as well. The key to this, though, in psychology is what type of research methods should we use to answer the problem in the question. So what I want to do now is show you different research methods. Are we ready? Okay. One method is called naturalistic observation. We're observing behavior as it unfolds in natural settings. We want to become part of the environment. So Jane Goodall did that with her chimp studies. She went and lived with the chimpanzees. I mean, that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? She lived with them. She observed them by living with them. Naturalistic observation provides descriptions, not explanations. I could have you people go out and do naturalistic observation, and what you would do is you could go sit in church groups or in a mall and just sit and watch people. Let's observe as people, if you can figure out non-verbal mating behaviors. What does that mean? When someone is interested in something with someone else, how does their body show that? Basically called flirting behavior, that's there. Let's sit and watch that. I can set up video cameras to do it, and then go back and look at the video cameras, or train you people to go out and watch. That's called naturalistic observation. Another study, don't worry about this, there's a lot of information on here, but I'll take my time. It's called correlational studies. Measures the degree of relationship, if any, between two events, measures, or variables. So in my study, my problem about where people sit, I could use what's called the correlational method. I want to get a correlation between classroom sitting and grades. So what do? I have a seating chart already. Then at the end of the semester, I'll look at my seating chart and write down your grades. Then I'll say, I wonder if there's a positive correlation between where you sit and your grades. Sitting up front, high grades. Positive correlation means when there's an increase in one measure is matched by an increase or a decrease in another measure. One goes up, the other one goes up. One goes down, the other one goes down. That would be a positive correlation. A negative correlation would be when one variable goes up and the other variable goes down. Right? That's a negative correlation that's there. When we use correlational research, it implies relationship, not causation. All right, so let me explain that. In that study, I've done this study, by the way, okay? And let me show you where the highest grades are. The highest grades are about 3 seats in, right there. 1, 2, 3 seats right there. And then it goes up 1, 2, 3 rows. These people in this little horseshoe usually get the highest grades. The next highest grades are the 2 people there, you on the end, you're on the end, and then the next horseshoe up goes to the next 2 rows up there. Okay? And then the worst grades are usually the last two rows and the people over there. Get out of here. You're not even going to pass. You might as well leave now. Now, what does that mean? Now, you might say, well, Steve, why is that? I can't tell you why is that, because it's only a relationship. It's not causation. I can guess at it and say these people pay more attention. Okay? It's only a correlation. And at the end of the semester, I'm going to look at you two guys, and you're going to be there, and I'm going to go, you see, they didn't drop out and they got A's. So my correlational study wasn't very good. There might have been a negative correlation with it, right? Because your grades went up and I was predicting it would go down. But you people are all going to get A's, so that's okay. All right? It implies, right, a relationship, that's all. But who knows why, what causes, right, people to get better grades who sit in the front. How about this correlation? You can correlate anything. A positive correlation between murder rates and ice cream sales. As murder rates go up, ice cream sales go up. As ice cream sales go up, murder rates go up. What about that? That's weird, isn't it? It's a correlation. Well, what's the causation, Steve? No, I'm not saying eating ice cream causes you to commit murders. There's no causation there. But there might be what's called an intervening variable, something that happens to increase both of them. What might that be? Temperature, good. As the temperature goes up, people eat more ice cream. As the temperature goes up, people get more frustrated, irritable, and lash out. And by the way, there is research on this. Murder rates go up as temperatures goes up, but only to a certain degree. And I don't remember if it's 98 or 97. It's something in the 90s. And then once it goes above that, murder rates go down. It's too hot, I guess, to kill somebody. What that is. Okay, but, right, correlation, no causation in this. Right? The only research method we could use that gives us causation is called the experimental method. The most powerful research tool that's undertaken to confirm or disconfirm a hypothesis. It's used for causation. This is where I can say cigarette smoking causes cancer. Then we use this method to show you that passive smoking or secondary smoking also causes cancer. I cannot say to you tertiary, which would be third level. That's when you walk into a room and the furniture has smoke in it and you kind of smell it a little bit. Okay, that's there. There's no causation in that. I can't say tertiary smoking will cause cancer, but there is a correlation with that. We do find that if you live in homes and you're not exposed to it, but you go to places like that, that there's a correlation, not a causation. So the only way we do this when we look at causation is because we can control the variables. The more variables you can control, then I can say X causes Y. So if I wanted to do the study on the effect of sugar on learning, I might come to this classroom and give this half of the class sugar packets, 4 of them, this half nothing. You people would take the sugar packets. Then I would give a lecture. Then I would test you on the lecture to see if these people with the sugar did better than these people without the sugar. Is that a good, solid psychological experiment? Say no. No, thank you. Right, you're all so smart. No, because I'm not controlling all the variables. What could cause somebody to do better on that test or worse on that test other than the sugar? How much sleep you got the night before? You're on a roll. What else? How much you study? How much you know about the material? What's that? How much you memorized? How good of memorized you are? The effect of sugar on your brain. Maybe you're diabetic and I'm filling you up with sugar. Not good.
Everything other than the sugar.
Anything other than the sugar, right. So that's a perfect answer, because in a experimental method, I've got to control all the variables other than the sugar. He said that perfectly. So what I have to do is I have to bring you all in probably weeks ahead of time. Make sure you get the same amount of sleep, the same amount of food. I have to test you to see what's going on as you process sugar. I have to figure out if you even know the material I'm going to lecture on. God, this is difficult to do. I even have to do something where you don't know you get the sugar. Because some people, when they take the sugar, go, "Ooh, I got sugar. I'm hyper." Because when you have a lot of sugar, you get hyper. No, you don't. There's no research that says people get hyper when they... But people think that. So if I give you the sugar, you may go, "Ooh, I'm hyper." And that becomes what's called a placebo effect. That'll destroy my study. And by the way, I can't know who gets the sugar or not. So I'll probably all give you some type of drink that tastes sweet, but some people get sugar and some people don't. Because if I know, I might unconsciously bias the study. So it has to be what's called thank you. A study that's there. I got to make sure, double-blind study, I got to make sure that no one knows. Right? Then it becomes a good experiment. In this experiment, we have what's called the independent variable. It's the condition the investigator is going to manipulate. In this case, sugar. Right? Some people get it, some people don't. And then we have what's called the dependent variable, the condition, usually behavior, that is affected by the independent variable. So I give certain people sugar, some people don't get it, and that depends upon, dependent variable, depends upon who gets it and who doesn't. And the dependent variable is usually a score. What do I mean by that? Independent variable, somebody gets sugar, somebody don't. The dependent variable is going to be the score you take on the test, and then I can relate the two together. Right? Then I can say, wow, sugar does improve learning. By the way, it doesn't. So if I gave you a study on the effect of marijuana on learning, since marijuana is a big topic nowadays, right? There's the marijuana bowl that's coming up, also called the bud bowl or something like that, right? Okay? So, does have an effect on learning. If I gave some people THC, a pill with THC in it, and some people don't get it, what would be the independent variable there? The THC, right? Some people get it, some people don't. Then I give a lecture, and I say to you, let's take the test. The dependent variable is going to be the score on the test. Independent, dependent variable. Very difficult to do with humans, though. Why is it difficult to do with humans? Because we can't control the variables. And that's why psychologists do a lot of research with cats and mice and rats and things like that, because we can control all the variables that are there. Another method, and then I'll stop, is called the clinical method, which is a case study. An in-depth study focuses on all aspects of a single person. So if I wanted to do a study on children of alcoholics, what I would do is find children who grew up with alcoholic parents, bring them in, and study them individually. Maybe give them a profile of psychological tests, interview them. Then I can say 52% of people who grow up with alcoholic families have this type of personality trait. So this is called a case study, where you study 100 different cases of people who grew up with alcoholic parents, and then you summarize it based on the majority of what people said. Case study. The last one is survey method, and a lot of you have done this. This is when you answer polling questions. You're walking around in the mall and someone says to you, "Can I ask you a question?" And you say yes. And then you give them demographic information, your age, your gender, your ethnic group, and then they ask you questions about stuff. So in the survey method, what happens then when we report 86% of white men 18 to 24 think this way or do these different things. And that's called the survey method.